All right, let's get right into it. Today we're digging into Samuel P. Huntington's really influential and, let's be real, pretty controversial book, Who Are We? It gets at a massive question. What exactly holds America together? What is its core identity? And what happens when that identity gets challenged? This exchange from back in 1997 just cuts right to the heart of the whole debate. On one side, you have Ward Connerly, who was pushing back against affirmative action, and he's insisting, I am an American, period. But the reporter keeps pushing for something else, right? A racial or ethnic label. And that's the exact tension Huntington's whole book is about. So, it all boils down to this one fundamental question. What does it actually mean to be an American? Is it about believing in a certain set of political ideas? Is it sharing a culture? Or is it just a bunch of different groups living under the same flag? Huntington's book is his big attempt to answer that, and we're going to walk through his argument starting right at the beginning.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the challenges Huntington saw coming in the 21st century, he says you have to rewind the clock. You have to go way back. He claims that America's original identity wasn't forged by immigrants, but by its very first settlers.
And this is where Huntington gets super specific. He calls this core identity Anglo-Protestant culture. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's the English language, British legal traditions, and this really interesting idea he calls the dissidence of dissent. Basically, it's a kind of built-in suspicion of centralized power that came from certain Protestant beliefs, which he says shaped classic American values like individualism and the famous work ethic.
And this slide right here, this really nails his central point. We hear all the time that America is a nation of immigrants. Huntington says, not so fast. He argues it began as a society of settlers who created a dominant core culture first. So in his view, immigrants didn't just show up and add a piece to a mosaic, they were expected to assimilate into a culture that was already there.
And to put some numbers on it, he points to a demographic study that he says shows that as late as 1990, almost half the U.S. population could trace their ancestry back to the people, the settlers and slaves, who were here in 1790. So for him, the big takeaway is that the cultural foundation they built had a huge, long-lasting impact. All right, so now let's fast forward to the late 20th century. This is where Huntington argues that this foundation we've been talking about started to face some serious challenges, and not from the outside, but from right inside American society. Huntington points to this incredibly rapid shift in policy. He sees the 1964 Civil Rights Act as this peak moment for a color-blind ideal, where everything is based on individual rights. But then, just 4 years later, you get these orders telling federal contractors to start looking at group proportions in hiring. He argues this was a complete 180, moving the goalpost from individual merit to group preference. And according to the polls he presents, this new direction created a massive gap between the policies being pushed by elites and what the public actually wanted. I mean, look at this. In poll after poll through the 80s and 90s, you see this overwhelming number, 84%, of Americans saying that ability should be the main thing that matters in hiring, not group identity. At the same time, Huntington sees another challenge emerging, what he calls transnational elites. And he uses this absolutely wild quote from a Ford executive. The guy was asked to recite the Pledge of Allegiance at a meeting and basically said that Ford wasn't really an American company anymore. Huntington's point here is that for a growing number of powerful people in business and academia, their loyalty was shifting away from the nation and toward these global networks. And all of this brings us to what Huntington saw as the single biggest and most unique modern challenge to American identity, an immigration wave that he argued was totally different from anything the country had seen before. He lays out 6 key reasons why, in his view, large-scale immigration from Mexico was fundamentally different. It wasn't just one thing, it was the combination of all of them. You've got the shared border making travel back and forth easy, the unprecedented scale, the concentration of people in one region which he thought could slow down assimilation, and this unique history over territory in the Southwest. He argued that all of this together created a major challenge to the traditional American melting pot. And wow, if you want to see what he means by scale, just look at these numbers for legal immigration alone. You can see how it just explodes through the decades. For Huntington, this wasn't just another wave of emigration. It was a demographic shift so big and so fast that he believed it was testing the country's ability to absorb newcomers in a way it never had before. So, after laying out all of these deep challenges, Huntington asks the big question: where does America go from here? He boils it all down to three possible and very, very different futures for the country.
Okay, so here are the three paths. First is cosmopolitan, where America just leans into globalism and national identity kind of fades away in favor of multicultural and global connections. Second is the imperial path, where America uses its muscle to export its values and remake the world in its own image. And the third option, the one he clearly favors, is the national path. America turns inward to recommit to that core Anglo-Protestant culture he argued defined it from the very start. In the end, Huntington isn't trying to predict the future. He's presenting a choice. By laying out all of these powerful competing forces, he's really forcing us to confront a fundamental question about the country's identity. And it's a question that still hangs in the air today, maybe more than ever. In a world of changing identities, what will America choose to be?